Welcome to the Garrulous Gavel. According to my driver's license, I'm John Tico. And my guest in this episode is Bridget Bailey Lipscomb. Bridget has had a fascinating life and career in the law. We'll hear about how she went from a childhood growing up in a predominantly African-American neighborhood in the south side of Chicago to the very center of power in Washington, D.C., working for a senator and then handling important cases at the United States Department of Justice. The topic that Bridget wanted to talk about is women in the law, the challenges they have overcome and the challenges that they still face. As the current president of the Women's Bar Association of the District of Columbia, Bridget brings a deep and thoughtful perspective to these issues. And then towards the end, we get garrulous with Bridget about her college sorority and how just recently she helped another woman join that same sorority. It's a fun story, but also emblematic of Bridget's tireless efforts to be a mentor and a role model for other women. I hope you enjoy this very interesting conversation with Bridget Bailey Lipscomb. Welcome to the Garrulous Gavel. I'm John Tico, and my guest today is Bridget Bailey Lipscomb. Hi, Bridget. Thanks for coming in.
Good evening, John. Thank you for having me.
And our topic today is going to be advances of women in the law. Just to kind of cut to the punchline a little bit, Bridget is currently the president of the Women's Bar Association of the District of Columbia. And we're going to learn a little bit about this organization that has been around for a very long time and has had a really interesting history. But Bridget is going to teach us a little bit today about the history of women in the law and challenges that they have faced and overcome and kind of where the future challenges are as well. Is that right?
That's correct. Looking forward to it.
Okay, great. So this should be a super interesting conversation. But before we get into that, we want to always learn a little bit about our guest. So I will start where I usually do and ask Bridget, where did you grow up?
I grew up on the south side of Chicago. I was the oldest of 4 children. We lived in what was considered probably a middle-class neighborhood for Black people at the time. And it was a comfortable life until I turned 14 when my parents got divorced and things were financially challenging. But it was a good childhood.
And how did things change for you at that point?
So in my early years, my mom was a stay-at-home mother. And my father worked 2 jobs, and we had everything we needed and took vacations every year. And we were all in private schools. When my parents got divorced, that changed. There was, of course, child support, but not enough to sustain all of the bills associated with raising 4 children, especially in private schools. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, my mom had taken a job. She was working at a factory, Nabisco, and she took the job probably when I was 8 years old, and she took it primarily for entertainment money, so we could have, a fun life in addition to my father paying the bills. I remember her first paycheck. She surprised us and took us to the Jackson 5 concert. It was like a big deal.
Wow.
Wow. That's how things changed.
Wow. So how old was Michael Jackson when you saw him?
Oh my, I don't know. Because,
still young though, right?
He was young, yeah. He was in his teens, probably.
And let me ask you this. Where was the concert? Do you remember?
It was at a big convention hall.
Yeah.
That's all I remember. But we were on the second row. That I remember.
Oh, right at the stage.
We were at the stage, yes.
What, without giving too much away, like roughly how old were you when this happened?
I think I was probably around 8 years old.
And was that like the first big concert like that you went?
It was.
So that must have made quite an impression on you.
It really did. It was really exciting because my mother kept saying, I have a surprise for you. I have a surprise for you. And I have two little sisters. And we all got new outfits and we got our hair done. And when we got there, we just couldn't believe it. And we were so close. We could just see Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
It was something to behold.
Was it a good concert?
It was an excellent concert.
I'm sure. They were fantastic performers. Yeah. That's great. So you grew up, you went through school in Chicago. Did you have any inklings of interest in the law at that phase of your life, or did that come later?
I think I always wanted to be a lawyer, John. It sounds cliche, but I think it was always in the back of my mind. I wasn't sure that it was actually attainable because I'm the first person in my immediate family to even graduate from college. But I remember when my mother got divorced, she had a pro bono divorce lawyer. And I remember telling my mom to tell the lawyer that I wanted to be a lawyer. And her lawyer sent me a note, and it was very encouraging. And she told me that I could be anything I wanted to be. And, well, she looks forward to welcoming me to the profession. And I think that really incentivized me to really look toward law.
That's really fascinating. Do you think it was something about sort of watching your mother's experience going through that, or was it just that you liked the idea of fighting for a cause, or sort of what was it about being a lawyer that you think might have appealed to you?
I wish it would have been fighting for a cause, but it wasn't. I think the thing that really appealed to me was once my mother was downtown for one of her divorce proceedings, and I remember her coming home so excited, and she said, I saw this young lady. She was well groomed. She was an African-American young lady, and she had on a nice blue suit, and she wore nice shoes, and she had a nice briefcase. And I saw my daughters in her, and she kept saying, I think she was a lawyer. So I envision you guys wearing a nice blue suit with a briefcase, walking downtown into a courthouse. And it was something about that stuck with me. So it was always in the back of my mind. And I think that probably incentivized me.
Yeah. It's just like once like your parent tells you that they have like a vision for your life, you pretty much that's hard to escape from, right?
It is.
And so you have sisters?
I have two sisters and one brother.
And did any of them also become lawyers?
One of my sisters is a lawyer, and one went into the financial market, but now she's in hospitality.
All right. Well, so your mother got her wish twice.
She did. She did.
That's great. Well, okay. So then, so after you, I guess, graduated high school, you went off to college. Started along that path to becoming a lawyer. Where did you go to college?
I went to Grambling State University, and I went with the intentions of going to law school. And I was told when I got there that if you majored in history, the history department would prepare you well for law school. So I majored in history, and I'll stop there. There's more to that story, but I'll stop there.
I'm sure that I was a history major too.
Okay.
So, and yeah, it's a decent major if you're going to go to law school. Why not? Mm-hmm. I'll ask you one other question that's going to sort of preview something we're going to talk about a little bit later. But when you were in college, did you join a sorority of any sort?
I did. I joined Alpha Kappa Alpha, which is the oldest Black sorority in the country. And I joined that organization because they got the trophy every year for having the highest grade point average. They were sophisticated but kind. And I just thought that that's a group of women that I'd like to be a part of. And so I did join that organization.
Okay. And just to preview what's going to come later in this interview, Bridget is going to tell us a story at the end of the interview about helping somebody else join that sorority many, many years later, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's just a little preview. So stick around for that if you're listening or watching this, because it's a nice story. Okay. So you were at Grambling. Where is that located?
Grambling, Louisiana. So It's about 5 miles from Ruston, Louisiana, where Louisiana Tech is.
Mm-hmm. And was that just very different than Chicago, I
Oh
imagine.
my gosh. Yes.
Yeah.
It's an HBCU.
Yeah.
And it was definitely a culture shock when I first got there. Coming from Chicago, a big city, Grambling consumes the entire town of Grambling. And when I went there, they didn't have any amenities. They had, I believe, mom and pop hamburger shop in downtown Grambling, and they had one clothing store that carried anything that you needed. So it was really a small town, but we went to Ruston for our shopping and everything.
And how far is that from New Orleans?
Oh, about 4 or 5 hours from New
so
Orleans.
pretty far away.
Yeah, close to Shreveport, Louisiana, if you're familiar with that. So about an hour from Shreveport.
So no humidity down there ever, right?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
The humidity was something to behold. I had to get adjusted because I came from Chicago with a cold climate. And when I moved to Louisiana, I didn't know what to do with my hair because it was always messed up because of all the humidity.
Right.
So it was a lot of adjustments, so to speak.
And do you think that Grambling sort of prepared you well for law school?
Yes.
Yeah.
Grambling gave me confidence that I don't think I would have gotten anywhere else. I did very well there. I graduated summa cum laude, and they put me on a pedestal, so to speak, and they told me that I could achieve any goal, and they just gave me a sense of pride that carried me through. And I know that the confidence that I have now came from Grambling.
Yeah, that's great. That's really nice. And did you go directly from college to law school?
I did not.
Okay.
That's the second part of the story that I was telling you about.
Okay. So tell what happened after college.
So, no, it was in college. That was during the time when computers were up and coming. I think it was before the PC became popular. And Grambling had a very strong computer science area. And a lot of my colleagues and my friends were in computer science. And it just seemed like a really good discipline to be in. And they got the great internships, and they would take a semester off and they'd work at Ford and IBM. And it just sounded so glamorous. And I knew I was as smart as them. And so I wanted to join in that group. So I thought about changing my major in my junior year, I think it was. And I remember calling my mother saying, you know what, I think I'm going to change my major. I think I want to be a computer analyst now. And she encouraged me to stay where I was. And she said, you know, you've always wanted to be a lawyer. And if you change now, then you'll have to graduate in 5 years versus 4 years. And she really encouraged me to stay in history. And I did. But after I finished, I decided that maybe it wasn't me that really wanted to be a lawyer. Maybe I was doing it for my mom. And so I really needed to think about what I wanted to do. So what did I do? I dabbled a little bit in broadcasting. I went back to Chicago. I worked at WLS Radio, and I worked in a little cable station, and quickly realized that that wasn't going to pay the bills. So I went back to Grambling and got a master's degree in public administration. And then after that, I took a job in computers. I worked for the Department of Defense at the Army Materials Command in the Quad Cities, which is 2 cities in Iowa and 2 cities in Illinois. And I did that. I was a computer analyst for about 2 years, I guess. And then I got tired of talking to the computer because I like to talk to people. And I decided, let's go to law school.
I mean, can I ask, what was the job of being a computer analyst for the Department of Defense? I mean, were you like writing programs or just doing like data? Like what? How would you describe that job?
Yes, I wrote programs that purchased weapons for the service persons in COBOL. So we wrote in COBOL. They, but I'm kind of giving my age, I guess, because that was a long time ago. But we wrote in COBOL, and we wrote the programs for that. Yeah.
So how did you learn that skill? Did you take some classes, or did you just teach yourself, or?
I took some classes at Grambling, but the Department of Defense had a program where they trained you. So I was in an intensive training session for like the first, I would say, 3 months of the job. And then there was on-the-job training for 6 months, 9 months. So that's how I learned.
So if you had just quit that job and moved out to Silicon Valley, whenever that was, by now you'd probably have like 12 mansions and a yacht. And
Go figure.
but you gave all that up at some point. And so what put you back on the law track?
You know, I think that I wanted to go back to law school after I attended my sorority sister's graduation from medical school. So she graduated from Pitt, and I went to her graduation, and I remember her saying, "Bridget, I thought you were going to be a lawyer. We used to talk about that all the time." And I thought about it, and then I was tired of talking to that computer. So I said, let me apply for law school and see if I get in.
Yeah. I mean, law is more of a people person profession. From what I know of you, you're a people person. So,
Yes.
so after a couple of years of talking to computers, that's when you applied to law school.
That's when I applied, yes.
And you went to the University of Tennessee College of Law. At least that's what LinkedIn is telling me. Is that right?
That's correct.
And why that school?
I went to that school because I got a scholarship.
Yeah, that's a good reason. That's a good reason.
So I got a scholarship to 2 schools, and I picked University of Tennessee because I had sorority sisters that lived in Nashville, Tennessee, and I thought I'd have an opportunity to socialize with them on weekends. Well, as you know, that never happened. I always had studying to do on weekends, but that's how I ended up there.
Okay. No, that's as good a reason as any. I mean, really. I mean, when you were in law school, did you start to develop any more specific thoughts about what type of lawyer you wanted to be? I mean, I know my experience is I didn't really know anything about law when I went to law school. And it wasn't until I got there that I started to sort of understand what these sort of different types of law were, different paths you could take as a lawyer. So like, when did that start to sort of crystallize for you? And when did you start to maybe think about what type of lawyer you wanted to be?
I think I always envisioned being in the courtroom when I envisioned being a lawyer. So I was in moot court. I was on the national trial team for 2 years for the University of Tennessee. And so I was able to speak on my feet and litigate, and I really liked that. So I knew that I wanted to do that. But, you know, I tell the young lawyers all the time, you really take a job, or you really get into the practice of law where you get a job. And I worked for a large law firm in Knoxville, Tennessee, and they were all trial lawyers as well.
Yeah. So that's where you went after law school. Is that
Yes.
right? Okay. So you worked for, was that Lewis, King, Krieg, and Waldrop?
That's correct.
And
it's now called Lewis Thomason.
Okay. And that was in Nashville.
That was in Knoxville.
Oh, Knoxville. I'm sorry. Knoxville. And you went there right out of law school?
Yes.
And you did what type of litigation? Just
Civil litigation,
Okay.
all kinds. In fact, I worked there when I was in law school. I was a summer associate there, and then I worked there as a intern, I guess is what it's called, in my last year in law school. And then I went on as an associate after I graduated.
Okay. And for how long were you there?
Almost 10 years. I was a partner there when I left. So I made it all the way to the top.
Yeah. Yeah. So why'd you leave?
Because my husband got transferred to D.C., and I stayed with the firm for about a year because I absolutely loved it. Lewis King, my partners were like family. I had a good book of business. I could keep 2 or 3, 4 associates busy. I had wonderful clients. I was very comfortable there in Knoxville. I knew everyone, and it was hard for me to leave. And so we commuted for about a year, and then I just decided it's time for me to move to D.C.
And so what did you do when you got to D.C.?
I started working for Senator Lamar Alexander as his legislative counsel.
Okay.
And let me just tell you quickly how I did that. So after a year, I was thinking about what I would do. And my firm even thought about opening an office here for me. But our business our business clients were in East Tennessee, so it was hard to transfer the business, and they didn't want me, and I didn't want to be in the business of trying to create a new book of business here in DC. So I was on this committee with a lot of business persons for Knoxville, and the committee was designed to try to increase the number of minorities in Knoxville. So a lot of the millionaires in Knoxville were interested in diversity. So we had this committee, and we would meet once a month, and we come up with projects on things to do to try to entice minorities to come to Knoxville and stay at Knoxville. And in fact, they would invest in businesses for African Americans and things like that. So when I was about to leave, when I was thinking about leaving, I mentioned it in the committee, and I said, you all have, I'm sure you have law firms that you work with in DC. If anyone has any ideas, let me know. I'm thinking about moving. And one of them said, well, Tom Ingram is his name. He said, Tom is in DC because he's Senator Alexander's chief of staff. So Tom was a friend of mine. And I called Tom and I said, do you have any ideas? I'm thinking about moving. And he said, let me meet with you next week. And I said, okay. So he came to my firm, and he said, I think you'll be a good fit in my office. And I said, I've never thought about working on the Hill. He said, but you like it. Let's just come and just try it and see. And he said, the senator will be here this week. I want you to meet him. And I met the senator, and I really liked him, and I respected him immensely. And I ended up on the Hill for about a year and a half.
Yeah. And that's that's quite the introduction to Washington, D.C. You went right to the center of it, right?
And that's exactly what Tom said.
Yeah. Lamar Alexander was in his day was a very powerful senator, was in the middle of a lot of big issues. Mm-hmm. And to go right to that.
Yes.
So how did you enjoy that job?
I really did. Senator Alexander is really a wonderful person. You get to know your senator very closely when you're their staffer. And we met with him once a week, but I met with him even more. Mm-hmm. And so I really respected him. He listened. He tried to improve things. Mm-hmm. But I missed litigation. Yeah. And, as a staffer, you prepare things for the member. And I was happy to do that. And I got some wonderful opportunities, but I wanted to be on my feet in the courtroom again. Mm-hmm. And there was a position that opened up at the Department of Justice, and the duties were exactly the same as the duties I had when I was in private practice, and it looked like a perfect fit, except the only difference was that my clients in private practice were small businesses and corporations and insurance companies, and my client in the Department of Justice would be federal employees and federal agencies. So.
Right. So you went into sort of one of the litigating branches there. Is it the Federal Torts Claims branch, or what was it? What was the?
You've done your homework.
Okay.
Yes,
well,
it's
not that hard these days. You just go on LinkedIn and
yeah.
I got your whole history. And so, maybe just say a few words about what that is. What were the cases about?
In order to sue the United States, Congress has to say you can sue them. So it's a waiver of sovereign immunity. And the Federal Tort Claims Act allows people to sue for damages. And so the Federal Tort Claims Act office handles all suits that are filed by citizens for personal injuries or property damage as a result of negligence of a federal employee or federal agency. And so there are other branches, other offices under the torts branch label. The Federal Tort Claims Act is probably the biggest office under the torts branch, but my current position in the Environmental Torts Office also falls under the Federal Tort Claims Act and the torts branch.
Okay. So this was sort of doing tort litigation, but your client is the Uncle Sam.
That's right.
And you've been at the Department of Justice since then. So for a few years now. Yeah.
Since 2004. I didn't expect to stay that long. I really didn't. I was planning on going there and getting experience with the federal government, staying about 5 years and then going back to private practice. Mm-hmm. And I got on some big cases when I was there, and I ended up staying on those cases probably 7 years. And then you go from that case to the next big case, and you get comfortable, and here I am.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and you kind of move up, and you get
Yes.
you get new challenges and stuff like
Yes.
that. So maybe just say a few words about kind of what your history at DOJ has been, and maybe some of the different things you've gotten to work on.
Sure. I started out as a trial attorney in 2004, and I was quickly assigned as lead counsel for one of the largest cases in the office then. There were a group of cases in Boston based on FBI's informant program. And so there were a chunk of cases. You may have heard of Whitey Bulger and Stephen the Rifleman Flemmy. So they were all based on those two characters.
Yeah.
And so the office had been working on those cases probably for 3 years when I joined.
What were the cases, though?
So
how is this a tort case?
Yeah. Well, they shouldn't have been. Well, Stephen Flemmy and Whitey Bulger killed a lot of people and injured a lot of people. And so they sued the United States saying that FBI knew or should have known that they were murderers and they were killing people. And they were FBI informants at the time.
Wait, so who was the plaintiff? People who had been hurt by them?
And their family members. The family member, most of them were wrongful death cases. So the family members of the persons who had been killed.
Oh, that's actually kind of interesting now that you say it that way.
Yeah.
So
they
what
were
was,
challenging.
just out of curiosity, what was the end result of those cases? I mean, is the government liable when an informant hurts somebody?
It's hard to say. So as you might imagine, we received tons of claims, and I can't even tell you how many, but we won most of the cases on motion. So to that end, maybe not, but we won on motion based on various grounds. So we saved the federal government and taxpayers about $5.7 billion based on those motions. There were about 7 or 8 cases that we had to try. We lost every one of those cases in trial. The facts were just too bad.
Yeah.
On the law, we felt that we should have won, but we didn't.
And those were cases that just for whatever reason, the judge didn't grant your summary judgment motion or whatever.
Right,
and
exactly.
Let the case
and so
go
we
to a
had
jury.
to try those, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, not a jury because you don't get a jury when
right.
you sue the government under the Federal Tort Claims Act. So they were all bench trials. So, that's what happened with those cases.
That's really interesting, actually.
Yeah, they were engaging, to say the least. They were interesting facts.
Yeah.
They were tough cases, though, because we were out-of-towners going into Boston, and the citizens there had a history of dealing with Bulger and Flemmy. And it wasn't that we were defending Bulger and Flemmy. We were defending the FBI's informant program, which, lives past Bulger and Flemmy and you and me, probably, right?
Sure.
And so that's what we were defending. But it's hard to translate that when you're trying to get a point across that the FBI didn't know or, didn't have enough evidence that they were killing these people because they were saying they weren't. They were following up. It's a lot of little twists and turns, but they were challenging cases.
That is really interesting. That is really interesting. But now you do environmental torts. So when did you make that switch? And maybe you could say a little bit about what environmental torts means.
So I moved to environmental torts in 2013. I was promoted to an assistant director position then. And what we do is defend the United States in lawsuits filed by citizens for injuries or property damage based on exposure to contaminants. So our bread and butter case is a case wherein during World War II, the government was burying munitions because at that time, the government thought that, and everyone thought, that's the way you got rid of contaminants. You buried them. And there were no CERCLA or RCRA laws prohibiting it because the science didn't know any differently. But years later, the soil and the water is contaminated because of those munitions. So we will get sued for exposure to contaminants. And that's what we do. Our office handles environmental tort cases all over the country. So the difference in my office and the Federal Tort Claims Act office is the Federal Tort Claims Act office works with the U.S. attorney's offices all over the country. So they really pretty much have the same jurisdiction. My office, because it's specialized and it's a scientific component to the cases, we handle all cases that deal with environmental torts. So my attorneys fly all over the country. Not during pandemic, but
back in the good old days,
in regular times, handling these cases.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. So you're currently the assistant director of environmental torts.
Yes.
So if somebody asked you, "Gee, should I take a job working at the Department of Justice?" What would you say?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I say it's the pure practice of law. Right. So I was in private practice, and I know that sometimes you have to make decisions based on your client or your client's budget. Right. With the Department of Justice, that's not the case. We are defending taxpayer money. That's what we do. My office exists to protect taxpayer money, and we do it regardless of the costs. Our attorneys get their paychecks every 2 weeks, whether they win a case or lose a case or whether they have a case. They can prepare for the next defense. And so it's a sense of comfort and fascination with research and writing. And you don't have to worry about the extra contemporaneous issues that seep in. There's no competition, because my attorneys work together. One is not trying to make partner or one is not trying to get ahead of the other. We make it clear in my office that that's not going to get you very far, that we work as teams, and we will be able to see who's bringing value to the cases, and we'll promote based thereon.
Yeah. Yeah. And you don't have to worry about client development. You have a client that is never going away.
You have a client that is stuck with you.
Yeah. So let's switch gears a little bit and kind of move to sort of our topic that you wanted to talk about, which is about women in the law. Mm-hmm. So I think just by way of introduction for people who aren't lawyers, there is this thing called the bar, that every lawyer needs to be a member of the bar. And that's basically you take the bar exam, you pass your what they call character and fitness to make sure you're not a bad person in the eyes of the bar. And then you sort of get your license to practice law. And then there are what, at least here in DC, we call voluntary bar organizations. And there's a whole bunch of them. And these are sort of voluntary organizations that lawyers can join that have different missions, different purposes, different histories. And there's a number of them in DC that have long histories that go back many, many years. And one of them is the Women's Bar Association of the District of Columbia. And Bridget is currently the president of that organization. So maybe you could just say a little bit about what that organization is, why it exists, what its mission is.
Absolutely. And thank you for giving me the opportunity. So the Women's Bar Association has a mission of advancing the interests of women lawyers, protecting the administration of justice, and friendship. And we have been in existence since 1917, and we were founded by two strong women, Ellen Spencer Mussey and Emma Gillette. And these women started the Women's Bar Association because they were not allowed to become members of the Bar Association of the District of Columbia. And they had a history of being first because they started a law school, which is now American University. And I think it was called the Washington College of Law. I think it was in 1898. And they started that law school because they were not admitted into law schools. So when they started the Women's Bar Association, they were a group of advocates. At the time, women couldn't vote. They couldn't serve on juries. They couldn't be admitted into voluntary bar associations. In some cases, they couldn't get licenses. And so these women were trying to make a change. And throughout history, they have made a change. They've been advocates. They've been at the forefront of voting rights. They've been at the forefront of all rights that impact women. And so we continue in that vein.
And the history of this organization is really amazing. And I'm going to put a link in the show notes for this episode to the webpage of the Women's Bar Association that has their history, almost year by year history. And going back to 1917, and I mean, I just want to point out a couple of things, because when I read this, I was like, wow, this really shows how different things were then compared to now, at least in certain ways, right?
Yes.
And like, so I guess the organization was formally founded in 1917. Mm-hmm. And you read through the history, and what you realize is that the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to vote in the United States, wasn't passed until 1920, 3 years later.
Yes.
So, just try to like put yourself back in time to what it must have been like to be a woman and to want to be a lawyer in 1917, when there probably were not a lot of role models. I mean, you've already talked a little bit about how important like just seeing a role model was for you, kind of giving you that image of what it could be, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
For the founders of this organization, there might not have been too many role models. So they really had to have not only like a strong sense of justice and right and an ability to kind of just buck the conventional wisdom, because I'm sure everyone around them must have been saying, well, women, you can't be a lawyer, right? Because there are none. What are you talking about? And to just have the imagination to think that could be something that could really happen in a world where it hadn't happened yet. I mean, it's just kind of amazing to think back to that moment in time, right? So what would you say is sort of the status of women in the legal profession now, or how would you judge that?
So I think our founders would be very proud. I really do. I think our founders would be delighted that we have a woman for a vice president. I think that our founders would be delighted on the number of women on the Supreme Court now. So we have made a lot of strides. Women have really improved in the practice of law. I have a few statistics I want to share with you.
Please.
In 1960, less than 4% of the lawyers were women. In 2016, 38% were women. Let's see. The number of women lawyers from the ages of 25 to 34 is now on par with male lawyers. And so there have been a lot of advances. There have been a lot of successes. We still have a long way to go. I share that because according to a 2021 American Bar Association article entitled "In Their Own Words," women lawyers won't reach gender parity until 2181. Not 2081.
Oh,
2181. Yes.
Well, okay. All right. I'm going to raise my eyebrow at that one and say, well, how do you know that? I mean, if you had gone back 160 years from today, you would never predict what the world is today.
That's true.
Right?
That's true. Yeah.
But the point is that there's still a lot
There's still a long way
progress
to
to
go.
make.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I can think just in the time that I've been a lawyer, which is about 30 years now, when my first private practice job was at a large corporate firm. Mm-hmm. And when I got to their office here in Washington, D.C., there were exactly, as far as I can recall, 0 female partners. Mm-hmm. And they made the first one while I was there. And she lasted about maybe a year or two. It was not a place where there were obvious role models for female lawyers. Now that same firm has quite a number of them. And I think at least in the private bar, at least at these large corporate firms, that does seem to have been the trend, that there seems to have been a lot of change over the course of the last, say, 3 decades.
It's really hard being the first.
Yeah.
And, it takes mentors who may not be in your discipline, but just to help you along. And so the Women's Bar Association has a very strong mentor program. Throughout my career, I have been an avid advocate for mentorship. When I first started practicing in Knoxville, Tennessee, there were very few Black lawyers in Knoxville, Tennessee. Mm-hmm. In fact, I think that maybe only 2 or 3 African American lawyers had been hired by large firms at that time, and I don't even think that they were still there. So one of my colleagues, an African American male, got a job with the largest firm in Tennessee. And then I got a job with the largest firm in Knoxville, and we worked together. But there was no one who looked like me that I could go to, that I could ask suggestions from, or I, bounce things off of. And it was challenging. My colleague and I worked together, and, you make a lot of mistakes early on. Mm-hmm. They're good mistakes because you never forget them and you never make them again, but we would share our mistakes. So if you go to this courtroom, this is what you need to do. But because of that experience, I try my best to always be accessible to anyone who asks me for time. Mm-hmm. No matter how busy I am, I will make time for you, because I know how important it is just to get a different opinion on things. And if you don't know who to ask or where to go, it's very challenging.
Yeah. And so like an organization like the Women's Bar Association, I imagine is, sort of fosters those types of connections as well, right?
Absolutely.
For women lawyers in DC. And so I imagine just sort of having an organization like that must be helpful. I mean, did you join the Women's Bar Association when you came, or how did you get involved in that organization?
I didn't join when I first came because, it takes a while to get admitted to the DC bar. So back then it would take months. And so when I got here, I think I applied. I don't remember when I was admitted. I think I was admitted sometime in 2004, maybe early or something like that. I don't know, maybe the end of 2003. And so I got involved with the DC bar first, and I joined some committees. And then I joined the Board of Governors. And then I think I joined the Women's Bar after that. Yes, I remember distinctly now, because I know we were on the Board of Governors together, but I can't remember if it was during my first term or my second term.
We were on I met you on the Rules of Professional Conduct Committee.
Okay, that's what it is.
Which was like in the early to mid 2000s.
Yes. Okay, that's right. Yeah. That's right. I remember that. Yeah. And so that was before I joined the Board of Governors. Yeah. And I remember there were about 3 women on the Board of Governors with me who would leave the meetings and go. It was like they had some place to go. And and then I'd say, "Where are you all going?" "Oh, we're going to a Women's Bar Association event." And that happened about 3 times. And I said, "What's up with this Women's Bar Association? Tell me about it." And they invited me to go to one of the events, and I joined. And so I've been involved with them ever since. I don't know what year that.
Yeah. Sometime in the misty past. No, that's good. So, I mean, one of the things that I sort of have sensed, although I don't know if this is true statistically, is that different sort of parts of the legal practice have been either more or less hospitable to women, mm-hmm. or maybe that's not the right word, but just that there are fewer women in certain areas of the legal practice than in others, certain types of organizations versus others. And, maybe you could just kind of give me your perspective on that. Do you see that as being true? Are there parts of the legal profession that have been more open to women so far? And maybe why do you think that is?
I think that's right. I think that it's one of those things where your comfort level is, and if you have a group of women in a certain area of the law, it's easy to invite other women in that area of the law. I think litigation is one of those areas. I think commercial litigation is one of those areas. There are many more, but the Women's Bar Association is trying to help women expand. We have what we call a Supreme Court litigators list, where we have litigators from all over the country who practice before the Supreme Court. And I think our list now is at 47, which is significant. But we want to showcase them. We want to have a platform for them so that people or organizations who are looking for a Supreme Court litigator who might entertain a woman will go to our list and hire them. There are some other areas that we're trying to expand. I think antitrust we're looking at, some other areas where women have not traditionally been litigators or been a part of that discipline. We're trying to expand that. So to answer your question, I think that maybe women go to areas where there is a comfort level, and maybe persons in leadership positions in areas that are not used to working with women are more inclined to work with people who look like them. And, it's time to break that cycle. So we encourage women to get in all disciplines, and the Women's Bar Association will be behind you to help you through, no matter what the discipline is.
Yeah. No, that's great. One thing I've noticed, because, I left my big firm and started my own sort of small firm with a partner. And so I sort of know some of the other smaller firms in town and talk to lawyers who have started their own firms. And there are some that were founded by women lawyers. But I have noticed that for whatever reason, that seems to be a less frequent path, for women litigators even, to sort of hang their own shingle or think that they can start their own business, as opposed to, going to work for an existing organization. And, that's not totally true. I know a few very, very successful women who started small firms and have done very, very well. But is that an area where you think we could encourage more women? Because I'll tell you, starting your own business and just being the boss of the business is a great way to just be on top right away. Right?
That's true. That's true.
There's no working your way up if you just start at the top.
Yeah, I see a lot more women hanging their shingle because they can't get a job in a big law firm or in the government, or chances are that they can get a job in the government more easily, I guess, than some of the corporations and the big firms. But, I'm thinking of a lot of my colleagues on the board of directors for the Women's Bar and some of my other organizations. And there are a lot of women who hang their own shingles because I think they feel it's easier for them to try to make a living than trying to break into an area that may be a little more challenging.
Okay, good. So I'm wrong, and I'm glad I'm wrong,
I
actually, because I think
you're wrong.
Well, I mean, it might also be that just that I guess maybe the firms that I'm thinking of tend to be firms like ours, although our firm is predominantly female. Most of the lawyers in our firm are women. So maybe small firms are more hospitable. I don't know.
That's been my experience, but I'll look into it.
So if you had to sort of identify a few kind of big areas where there are still remaining challenges to be overcome, what would you say those are?
Again, law firm partnerships, general counsel positions. So women make up about 40% of associates in large law firms, but only or less than 24% of equity partners, right? Only a third of state and federal judges are women. Women receive 1 out of every 5 Fortune 500 general counsel positions. And women earn less than their male counterparts as a partner, even if they originate more. So there are a lot of opportunities for improvement. Male general counsel on average make 39% more than female general counsel positions. So, we're always trying to improve things. We're always looking at studies and statistics, and we're looking at trends, and we celebrate organizations and law firms that celebrate women. So while we've made a lot of progress, there's a lot of progress to make. Mm-hmm. And the Women's Bar Association is steadfast in that regard.
So how do you change those numbers? So let's just take law firm partners. Okay. So women are underrepresented in the higher ranks of large law firms. How much of that do you see as just being something that will change over time? Like, in other words, there's just sort of a generational thing. The oldest partners in the firms tend to be male, but eventually they won't be there anymore, and then there will be more female partners. Or do you think that there are sort of institutional things about those firms that need to be changed in order to make them more welcoming to women?
Yes and yes.
Okay. So yeah, often the answers are yes and yes. It's hard to, it's like, the statistics just kind of are what they are. You can't really fight with the statistics, but trying to understand why things are like that and then what you do about it, that's when things get a little more complicated, right?
Yeah. So I think things are like that because, as I mentioned, people are comfortable with people who look like them. Mm-hmm. And it's harder to reach out and become friends or close colleagues with people that don't look like you. And so, yes, more women will become partners when some of the current partners retire. But I think that the culture has to change. That's mm-hmm. the key. Mm-hmm. I think that the mindset has to change. Women have to be considered in the bottom line. That's the only way it's going to change. If women are part of the impact of the dollars that these firms bring in, mm-hmm. the culture will change. So what I mean by culture is there needs to be a little more flexibility, right? Women, a lot of them have children. And so they may need a little more flexibility with hours. Fortunately or unfortunately, the pandemic has helped in that regard because women have had an opportunity to telework a little bit more. And even though we've lost a lot of women in the profession because of the pandemic, the flexibility has been a huge help. I've seen examples many times where women are criticized or commented on behind the scenes because they have to leave early or they can't take depositions at 7:00 in the morning, of the doctor. Mm-hmm. And so we have to send someone else out there, or they can't take the doctor's deposition at 6:00 in the afternoon when the doctor is available because they have to go home and take care of children. On the other hand, if a male lawyer has to do that, it seems that he's complimented and he's looked at as someone who is just a great person, that he's going to compromise his job to take care of his children. Mm-hmm. So you have to change the culture, give women a little more flexibility, consider things. It's little things that make all the difference in the world. If you are going to, say, have a picnic, you have to consider what the women's schedules are. If you're going to bring people back to work and a woman has a child who hasn't been vaccinated yet, you need to give that woman a little flexibility so that she doesn't feel pressure to come back to work and she won't be ostracized or looked at sideways by her colleagues. And so it comes from the top. It's little things like that change the dynamic. And then if women feel that they are welcomed and if they feel that they are acceptable or that they are considered, then they'll stay longer. They'll be more committed. And here's the key, though. I think that the clients have to make clear that they want women on trial teams and on whether it's litigation, they want women on their representation teams, not only as a representative, but they want them working on the case and they want to see them in the courtroom and they want to see them at the deposition. If that happens, law firms will do what is necessary to, one, hire women and two, retain them. That brings more competition and it gives women a little more flexibility. So if a woman is, say, discriminated against because she has to leave early, or she's discriminated against because she has a high-pitched voice, or she is left off, she's left off of a team, she has the flexibility and the opportunity to go to another firm who also needs her. And there's a better chance that retention will be better and women will be in a better situation and be comfortable where they are, and that'll change the dynamic. Right now, I think the way it is, there's a lot of lip service about diversity. There have been a lot of improvements, but there's a lot of lip service, and I hear a lot of examples of some women who are put on the pitch team and then they've never been able to work on the case after they got the case. Mm-hmm. Well, if the client will make sure that once the pitch team person who showed up is also working on the case, then that pitch team person who is the representative as the minority has a little more flexibility. She can speak up when things are uncomfortable, and that makes her more comfortable there, makes her more comfortable staying there. And rather than having to leave because she's discriminated against, she can speak up, and she doesn't have to worry about taking discrimination because she has to pay a bill.
Right, right. And I certainly think for litigators, in addition to the clients, the judges make a huge difference. And just increasing the number of women judges, I would think would just sort of make the courtroom a more comfortable place for female litigators. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, there are a lot of judges out there that have a local rule that if a minority or a young lawyer is going to argue a motion, she or he will have a hearing to give them an opportunity to get some experience.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
We applaud that.
And, one of the things that we've started to see in our practice, we do a lot of plaintiff side class actions. And so one of the things that happens in that practice is you sometimes have these big cases, multi-district cases, where you have lots of different law firms that have brought similar cases. And then there's some process for sort of deciding who the lead lawyer is going to be to represent all of these different groups. And just within the last few years, we've noticed a lot more sensitivity of many of the judges to trying to take diversity into account in choosing those lawyers. Because on the plaintiff side, that's what matters. It's not so much about, on the defense side, it's about getting clients. On the plaintiff side, it's often about these sort of leadership positions, being the face of the case, so to speak, right? The one who is associated with the case and who's then going to get the credit if it goes well, right? So that process is very much controlled by the judges often. Yeah, we're involved in AFFF multi-district litigation you may have heard about in South Carolina, and I understand that the judge has encouraged younger attorneys on the defense team and the plaintiff team. And I think that's what you're speaking of. They have these little groups who are the face of the thousands of defendants. Right.
I mean, thousands of plaintiffs, or thousands of, maybe not thousands, but many of the water districts for that particular case. So yes, it really helps if the judges take that in consideration and encourage it.
Yeah. And I think a lot of this is this kind of sort of, I think, accounts for a lot of the, I don't know, what's the nice way to put this? A lot of the debate that goes on around Supreme Court appointments, because in the legal world, the Supreme Court justices are at the sort of the top of the heap. And so those people, they not only have a job to do, but they have enormous symbolic importance, I think, to the whole country, really.
Yes.
But definitely within the legal world.
Absolutely.
Right? And so the gender and race and backgrounds of Supreme Court justices get debated, so intensely, and we have these, somewhat nasty fights about these appointments. But I think that's because the stakes are really, really high. And that a lot of that, in some sense, I feel sorry for the justices because they sort of become these caricatures that other people, think of them in these very sort of monolithic terms. But who those people are and what they represent, I think, is just enormously important to the profession.
So it's so important that let me just give you one little anecdote. So the Women's Bar Association did a big program on the Supreme Court celebrating representation recently. And Judge Bernice Donald on the Sixth Circuit was on our panel. And she gave this story about one time when I think she was on the state court then, she said that she was on the bench and she had an African-American court reporter and there was an African-American law clerk there, and there was an African-American bailiff, and everyone in the courtroom was African-American. And so a white male came into her courtroom and he looked at her, he looked around the courtroom, and he realized that he was the minority there. So he left. And she said when he came back, he had an African-American attorney.
Right.
That's an indication of representation matters, right?
Yeah.
If you don't see anyone who looks like you may not be confident that you have experienced justice. So appearances make a difference. And you're right. That's why there's so many battles on the Supreme Court appointments and circuit court appointments, as well as the district court appointments, because it's appearances are important.
Absolutely. Okay. So is there anything in particular you want to say about, projects that are going on right now with the Women's Bar Association, or particular things that you're focused on? Yeah,
so I'm at the end of my term.
Is it just a 1 year?
It's a 1 year term,
okay.
And I will be stepping down on May 31st. I am passing the gavel to our president-elect on May 19th. I hope you'll join us at our annual dinner at the National Building Museum.
If you'll have me.
I will have you. I'd love you to be there. So we've had a very robust year. We will have an advocacy conference at Kroll and Mooring on May 5th. I established this advocacy committee because we were getting so many requests to sign on to legislation to advocate for different issues that affect women. Mm-hmm. And so we have to be very careful as a 501c6 organization that we don't cross the line. And then we have to think about, if we sign on to this legislation for this particular group, how do we say no for this particular group? So I put a committee together to study all this and look at that and look at, what we should be signing on to, what we should be analyzing. So our basis for making decisions on that is our mission and our strategic plan. But we will have a conference on May 5th where we will notify our membership. We'll let them know what we plan to do, the parameters surrounding any legislation that we sign on to, and advocacy in general. And we'll have like networking sessions and everything. So that's upcoming. I just mentioned the annual dinner. We have a few other programs pending, but I'm pretty much slowing down and ending the term.
And like how big is your membership?
We have about, on average, about 650 to 700 people.
So that's only a tiny fraction of the women lawyers.
That's right.
So, all right. So if you're listening to this podcast and you're a lawyer in Washington, D.C., do you have to be a woman to join?
You do not have to be a woman. I'm so glad you asked that.
Yeah.
You don't even have to be a lawyer. Okay. All you have to do is have an interest in women and the advancement of women. So as I said, our mission is to protect the administration of justice, to protect and advance women lawyers and their interests and friendships. So all you have to have is an interest in protecting and advancing women, and we would love to have you. Go to wbadc.org and you can join today.
Great. All right. So all you people out there, if you're a human, you can join this, or I assume you have to be a human. Probably.
You have to be a human,
or at least at least be able to pay the membership fee. So, right. Join the Women's Bar Association of the District of Columbia. It's a great organization with just an amazing history. Mm-hmm. All right. So Bridget, If you were, or if I was a new lawyer joining the bar, and I was a woman in the District of Columbia, what would be your pitch for why I should join the Women's Bar Association?
We have some of the giants in the legal profession in DC in our organization, and they are eager to help women and male lawyers as well if they're starting out. They are available and accessible. So if you say, I am a new member of the Women's Bar Association, they will make the time for you. They may be in an area of the law that you're interested in. We also have other resources that will help you be successful in your career. We have a 1,000+ item career toolkit behind our member-only wall. That consists of interview tips. It consists of resume writing tips. It consists of podcasts and outlines and briefs, and it consists of movies, anything that will help you in your career. And it is organized based on area of the law. There is a page for membership. For mentorship. So you can get a mentor there. There's a meet a moment mentor where mentors give tips on how to be successful in your career. That in and of itself is worth the membership. But we also have career development programs regularly, and we have life improvement skills programs. We endorse executive and judicial candidates for new positions. So if you're interested in getting to know or having an input on some of the judges that will go on the bench or some of the executive branch members who will be selected, you can join that committee. We have currently over 27 committees and forums. So there's a different area of the law that you can join. You can learn you can be introduced and get to know people who are also in your field who may be able to help you and network with you to help you succeed in your career. We have a strong mentor program. I think I said that. We issue statements on issues that impact women. So you might want to write. You can be involved in writing blogs or writing articles on our statements. And we are well engaged on social media. We showcase our women. We showcase our members. We highlight their successes. If you get a new award, if you get a new job, we celebrate that. And the sisterhood is second to none. I had surgery early this year, and the love and support that I received was unbelievable. My doorbell was ringing 4 times a day where food deliveries were being made and plants and flowers and gifts. And that is consistent in this organization. It's not just a business organization. These women really want women to succeed.
That's fantastic. I'm going to join.
I'm going to hold you to it, John. I'm going to hold you to it.
And I'm definitely going to encourage all the women lawyers in my firm to join, because I'm not sure that many of them have. I think, it's so easy as a lawyer to just get so busy, right? There's always another deadline. There's always another brief to write. There's always another contract, whatever it is that you do, right? And it really is hard sometimes to almost have the discipline, because I actually do think it takes discipline to carve out a chunk of time to do all of the other things that you can do as a lawyer. And I think these voluntary bar organizations, or even the actual bar association in DC has lots of committees, which is how I met you.
That's right.
But there's all these voluntary bar organizations and different groups you can join, and they do interesting things. It's great networking. I mean, it is career advancement, but it's also just interesting and fun. Mm-hmm. And but it does take a little discipline to actually decide to get involved, right?
I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah. Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Yes, it does. And when you're trying to bill hours, if you're a new lawyer in a big law firm and there's so many expectations, you're thinking, why in the world would I add something else to my plate when I can barely make it with billing hours? It is worth it, because you may not be at that firm throughout your career, and you will have made contacts who will help you move to your next position. And I heard a judge say it best on one of our programs. She said, it's challenging and you have to organize and plan to be a part of these organizations. But these organizations have power, and you may want to be a judge one day, and you may want a political appointment one day, or you may want a recommendation for a position where a partner to that law firm is a member of the Women's Bar Association, and you don't want to go to them for the first time and they've never seen you. You want them to be familiar with you.
Yeah.
And I will also add too that yes, it is challenging, and yes, I have to schedule every minute of my day. I am very, very busy. But some of my best friends have come from these organizations. And that's not cliche.
Yeah.
Some of my best friends that I consider sisters and brothers, because we have male co-chairs as well, John, you're welcome to join us, are, I've met through these organizations. So it's an invaluable experience.
Yeah. And you meet people you wouldn't have otherwise met, right? Because they might be somebody who practices a completely different type of law in a completely different type of organization. And really the only place you might have crossed paths is working on some committee with one of these bar organizations.
And you know what? Let me add one more point to that. And I'm not sure if it's as prevalent here in DC because this is such a big town. But when I was in Knoxville, Tennessee, I was very involved as well. So I was involved in the Knoxville Bar Association and other organizations as well. It benefited my career immensely because I knew the judges because they were on committees with me. I knew my opponent because we were on committees together. They knew who I was because I was so active. So it's hard and it's challenging to be as adversarial with your friend, right? And it has proven to be a benefit to me throughout my career. So I strongly encourage people to get involved in volunteer bar associations. Even though it is time consuming, it'll be worth it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. That's great. All right. Well, thank you for that. And, anybody who's listening who doesn't join now is just, I can't imagine why they wouldn't. It's such a good pitch. All right, so now we're gonna turn to something a little more personal, as we usually do on the podcast. We like to end with learning something a little more personal about our guests. And when I asked Bridget what she wanted to talk about, the first thing she said is, well, I just like to help other people get ahead. And I was like, yeah, but that's kind of vague. You can't just go on a podcast and say, I like to help people. So tell me a story. So now she's going to tell us a little bit. I don't even really know the whole story, but it goes back to the sorority that you joined as an undergraduate in college, Alpha Kappa Alpha, right? Which you told us a little bit about.
Yes.
But now maybe pick up the story about how you helped somebody else join that sorority many, many years later. Tell us about that.
So I'm not sure that I mentioned that Vice President Kamala Harris is my sorority sister. I may have mentioned that. But yes, Alpha Kappa Alpha is near and dear to my heart. My line sisters, that's what we call it, the ladies that I pledged with at Grambling State University are still close to me, and we're still just like sisters. So it's a bond that does not go away. There's a friendship. It's more than a friendship. It's a sisterhood, and we are very proud of it. And so fast forward probably 30 years, my mom has she had a new caretaker to start taking care of her maybe a year or so ago, and she's a young lady. In fact, she put my mom on social media. She's just absolutely wonderful. I look at her like a little sister now almost. And she found out that all of my mother's daughters are members of the Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. And she immediately told me that she always wanted to be an AKA. And she said, Bridget, what can I do? Is there a way that I can prepare myself to do this? Well, at the time I think she was at a junior college at the time. And so I encouraged her to transfer to a full 4-year college so that she could go to a place where they had a chapter. And she did that. And then when she got there, I kind of helped her get to know some of the AKAs there. And I told her, you will need some community service in your background. So let's start thinking about some projects that we can work on. And she came up with some projects for her community service. And she was collecting toiletries for homeless women and delivering those types of items to homeless women. And she had another community service project, I think, where she was collecting non-perishable goods and delivering them to the homeless around holidays and things like that. So she was keeping up and she was making a record of her community service. And then she told me, they're about to have a meeting, Bridget. The AKs are about to have an interest meeting. And she said, what should I do? So we had a preparation meeting and I told her how to act. I said, you can't be too close to them because they'll probably retaliate. They want you to act a certain way. This is how you have to dress when you go.
Oh, okay. So I got to stop you right there.
Yes.
Like, tell, all right. So how do you have to dress? I mean, what advice do you give a college student about how to dress to go to a meeting?
Yes. So no jeans. You probably have to wear a nice pair of slacks or a dress. You can't wear any pink or green because those are our colors and those are for us. And you may wear that normally, but not to our meeting because we may remember that and we may think that you think you're already a part of us. Those are things, and I told her, to get to know them early on. And then I told her also before that to look at our website, to look at our history, to look at what is required to become. And she did that and we worked on that. And then I wrote her a letter so that she could become an AKA, and fingers crossed, she should be an AKA next week.
Oh, that's great. I don't know, what are sort of like the stages to that? Do they have to be selected in some way?
Yes, she had to be selected. She had to file an application.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
And go through interviews and everything. Yes. And she was selected. And then there's a pledge period.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my wife was in a sorority in college as well, and was kind of, one of the, I think she was the president of the sorority one year or something like that. Mm-hmm. And she used to tell me these sort of stories about the whole sort of hierarchy, the national, and they would send people out to the chapters and sort of try to teach them how to be better or whatever.
Yes.
Does AKA have that whole kind of thing?
Yes, we do.
And so have you stayed involved in the organization after college?
Yes, I'm a life member.
Okay.
And I've been involved. I haven't been involved in many activities with the AKAs. I was president in undergrad, and so I've been very engaged over the years, but with the Women's Bar, and I'm a member of the Links Incorporated as well, which is another women's organization that works to help the community members. I have a national position there, so that takes a lot of my time too. But I am a member of the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, and I do participate in some of their larger programs, but the intricate details like I do with Women's Bar or Links, I don't do that with AKA right
there's
now.
only so many hours in the day, right?
There are only so many.
You're already, I mean, Bridget, you're already running like 5 different organizations, so come on.
You
can't be in charge of everything. You got to leave something for somebody else.
If I had 2 more hours in a day, John, I'd be really, really happy.
Well, that's a really nice story. So I hope she makes it through her pledge period and it all goes well. Have you gotten feedback from her? Is she enjoying the experience?
Yes,
still excited
I
about it?
am buying all kinds of pink and green items and paraphernalia. We're very excited, and we will shower her with many gifts.
Do the AKAs have like a mascot? Like
a symbol? Not really. So when I was in undergrad, it was the frog. There was a pink frog, but they don't really use that anymore. So no, we don't really have one.
So what are you going to buy?
So anything with symbols on it. So our colors are pink and green.
Yeah.
So pink and green umbrellas, pink and green keychains, T-shirts, bags.
Do they sell like the sweatshirt with the letters
jackets,
on it, all that stuff?
Yes, those are the fun items that all new pledgees want.
Yeah, you got to like show off walking around campus, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So, that's one small example, John. Over the years, I've tried to help lawyers, get promoted. A lot of my mentees are now judges, and I watch mentees become leaders in the Department of Justice, become partners. But I wanted to give you an example of something that was non-law related.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I mean, it just from talking to you today, I can tell that this is sort of a recurring theme in your life, that you sort of had role models that you saw that led you to think of becoming a lawyer and kind of led you on the path, and that you've sort of taken that to heart and tried to find ways to be that role model for other people as you've moved through the profession. And I think that's fantastic.
I believe you cannot be what you haven't seen. And I've been very blessed in my life and in my profession. And I feel like I have an obligation to give my time to not only lawyers and not only anyone who asks, but I go into the city and I always talk to young children, and I'm always involved in programs because I want people to see that you can succeed even if you live in the inner city. I grew up on the south side of Chicago from humble beginnings, and I was able to make it. And I want people to see that. And until they put me 6 feet under, I will be doing that.
Well, hopefully that won't be anytime soon. Our country needs you working at the Department of Justice, and all of these other organizations need you for your leadership and your wisdom. And I just want to thank you for giving me a little bit of your time to hear these great stories and to talk about women in the law and the Women's Bar Association. I will put in the show notes some links to all these different organizations that you've mentioned, so that people can find their websites and so forth. Do you do any sort of like social medias or a way for people to find you personally? If someone wants to reach out to you, how would they do that?
Yes, I'm on LinkedIn.
Okay.
I'm on all of them.
Okay.
Twitter, Instagram,
Okay.
Facebook, and I know you're going to ask me my handles, and I can't think of them right now.
That's
I'll give
okay.
them to you so you can put them in the notes.
Okay, great. As long as you're okay doing that,
Yeah.
we'll put your LinkedIn and your Twitter at least. Those are kind of usually how people find each other these days. Okay, great. So if you're listening to this and you want to reach out to Bridget, just look in those notes, and those ways to find her will be there. And thanks again. This has just been such a fun conversation.
John, thank you for giving me the opportunity. I always want to talk about the Women's Bar Association, and I always want to find some time to connect with some old friends. So I appreciate seeing you.
Okay, thanks again. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Garrulous Gavel. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. You can always find us at garrulousgavel.com. If you'd like to send feedback or suggest a guest, please contact us at our email address, garrulousgavel@gmail.com, or on Twitter at garrulousgavel. Our cover art was created by artist and illustrator extraordinaire Joan Tico. Our theme music was written and performed by scientist and saxophonist extraordinaire Robert Tico, and our producer is the inimitable K.O. Myers of Particulate Media. See you next episode.